Chapter 3. Valuation as a Roadmap to Success. This chapter is about the various tiers of valuation services you should consider in order to reach your goals. But before we get into that, here's the story of a recent Sofer Advisors client that will drive home the information you need. I changed details for privacy concerns. What matters most is that it shows a typical case of a business owner who already performed light exit planning. But then life threw her a curveball she hadn't predicted. As a result, this person, whom I'll call Carole, had to drastically change her plans. Let's begin our story. One day, Carole was wrapping up another busy yet satisfying day at the animal hospital she owned and ran. She had loved animals from an early age, so it was natural she became a veterinarian. After learning the ropes at another practice, she established an animal hospital in a wealthy Atlanta suburb, treating everything from exotic birds and small mammals up to horses, an attractive feature in an area rich with equestrian clubs. Carole's business grew to $4 million in revenue because she built her business around her clients' wealthy suburbanites who treat their pets like family and will spare no expense to maintain their health. Dr. Carole, as she was known to her clients, always took time to explain pet health options in a compassionate way using the bedside manner we expect for human patients. She also handpicked her team based on their ability to deliver the same level of service. On an unremarkable Wednesday in the fall of 2023, Carole was reviewing patient notes and emails before heading home. It had been a packed day for her. She performed a surgery in the morning to repair a broken leg for a dog named Scout, went back into the operating room to remove a cyst from Snuggles the cat, and had a first visit with a puppy adopted by a client whose parents had been bringing animals to Dr. Carole for 20 years. Finally, she diagnosed Momo the guinea pig with vitamin deficiency, taking the time to explain to Momo's 6-year-old owner and her parents how to use the vitamin C drops she prescribed for the furry little animal. Before leaving, Carole reviewed the company email box. She found her office management team, people who loved animals as much as the vets and nurses they worked with, had done their usual excellent jobs answering client inquiries and routing questions to the appropriate staff member. Then she flipped to her direct work email. The top message came from another vet named Bill who operated 6 animal hospitals in the greater Atlanta region. Bill's subject line read, "Let's talk. I have a great offer for your hospital to join our family." Unimpressed, Carole didn't bother opening the message. She moved on to scan her inbox for things she considered important. Carole had grown accustomed to seeing emails from Bill, along with several other large competitors as well as financial buyers like private equity firms interested in buying out her animal hospital. The reason she didn't bother to open Bill's message is that selling now didn't fit her time frame. Carole and her husband, Dan, were both in their early 50s. She expected to retire in 10 to 15 years. Then they'd move abroad to live in Italy, a country they both loved dearly after having spent time there in college. For now. Carole was secure in the stability of her busy, profitable facilities. She had no desire to sell anytime soon. But Carole had no clue how quickly life can change, especially for a vulnerable business owner. When she got home that night, Dan greeted her. He wore a very serious expression on his face. Uncharacteristic of her happy-go-lucky husband, Carole knew something was definitely amiss. "I have bad news," was the first thing out of his mouth. Carole's thoughts went to the recent appointment he had with his doctor. For weeks, Dan complained of indigestion and nausea he couldn't attribute to diet. His thought was it might be an ulcer from work stress. The truth was far more serious. Dan asked Carole to sit down. Then he dropped the bomb. He had been diagnosed with stomach cancer. "But don't worry," he quickly added. "The ball is already rolling. My doctor arranged for surgery next week." "Already?" Carole asked, still in shock. "Yes, it'll likely be followed with chemotherapy and radiation treatments." Carole later told me this conversation felt surreal after all. She was usually the one on the other side of this kind of discussion, laying out treatment plans to clients whose pets were suffering from cancer. After she got over her shock, Carole's mind turned to how Dan's diagnosis would transform everything, beginning with her schedule. For one thing, helping Dan through surgery and recovery would take up a lot of time. So would chemotherapy and radiation treatments. Somehow, she managed to complete her work that week. Distracted and depressed, it was very hard to focus, much less be her competent, compassionate self. By the time the next weekend rolled around, Carole had made a profound decision, one that would change the course of her life. In short, Carole realized she needed to devote her time to being Dan's champion and chief supporter in his cancer fight. She also wanted to maximize quality time with her husband both during treatment sessions and in between. She couldn't do all this while still running her busy animal hospital. Therefore, she made a pivotal decision. Based on unforeseen circumstances, she had to sell her business a full 10 years ahead of her original schedule. Though she loved what she did, it was much less important to her than a future with her beloved husband. The decision to sell was made clearer by the fact Carole didn't have anyone within the business who could take over. Her partners were younger vets without the experience necessary to run the hospital. Even if they had the ability, they lacked the funds to become a viable alternative to selling the business. Right after coming to this conclusion, Carole turned to her longtime business lawyer, Albert, for advice on how to quickly sell her business. She knew her competitor, Bill, was the most likely choice to buy her out, due to the interest he had steadily expressed over the years. Carole called up Albert. "How can I fast-track the sale of my business?" she asked her attorney. "I'm sure Bill will be fair with his offer. Should I just bite the bullet and ask him for his number?" From Bill's frequent emails, it was obvious the man did have an offer in mind. It seemed he just wanted Carole to reply before showing his cards. "Carole," said Albert, "it's crucial you understand your company value before entering any negotiation." "It is." "Absolutely. You'll only get one shot at this. You therefore want to maximize your sale price to support your life with your husband and, of course, all the unknowns that could spring up. My advice? Complete a business valuation to get the insights you need to negotiate with Bob on equal footing." Honestly, Carole wasn't thrilled with Albert's words. She felt a valuation would be too costly and also too time-consuming to provide any real benefit. After all, isn't a buyout offer in itself a form of valuation? Albert soon shifted her thinking by referring to her own business. "Carole, think about it like this. Would you ever operate on an animal without x-rays and every other appropriate test to fully know what's going on with your patient? Think of evaluation the same way. You need a deep understanding of your business and its value. This can only come from an expert and an individual independent from the parties and situation. Because a buyer always wants to buy low, a valuation will help you avoid leaving money on the table." To her credit, Carole took Albert's message to heart. Just because she decided to sell quickly didn't mean she should act rashly. A valuation did make sense based on how Albert framed it, as a tool to know whether an offer is fair or not, offering solid ground to make a potential counteroffer. She next asked her legal advisor, "So how do I get the most professional valuation quickly?" She could hear Albert smiling through the phone. "There's only one valuation firm I would point you toward, Sofer Advisors. Let's make the call together to get you introduced." Based on that initial call, my team and I began working closely with Carole. Together, we supported her revised exit plan, looking back. Carole now reports the valuation work we completed for her was the best thing I could do to ensure I didn't end up selling my business for much less than it was worth. Sofer Advisors offerings. 3 tiers to suit any business and/or situation. Whether you are in desperate circumstances like Carole or have room to mull your options, Sofer Advisors assist clients with 3 tiers of valuation services. In the balance of this chapter, we'll cover them, discussing the respective strengths, exploring what type of business is an appropriate fit at each level. We'll also explain what tier Carole eventually chose and why the particulars of her situation made choosing the right tier so very crucial. Tier 1, Limited Scope Valuation. This is specifically aimed at businesses worth less than $1 million. The typical cost for this tier runs between $1,500 and $2,500, sometimes leading people to ask why it is so budget-friendly. Firstly, it considers the small revenue size of applicable organizations. Secondly, the cost is kept down through the use of valuation software we license to complete this work. There is a trade-off of quality for speed and low price, though. Our team will only be involved in 2 to 3 hours of work for a Tier 1 valuation. So what's the value of a limited scope valuation? Consider it a finger in the air or an ear to the rails, depending on your preferred metaphor. We view a limited scope valuation as a conversation starter, i.e., what is the value of your business according to the software? Is it higher or lower than you imagined? This first step often results in further questions requiring the more advanced work of a Tier 2 or Tier 3 valuation to accurately answer. Because we believe in helping clients achieve ongoing success, whenever a Tier 1 client moves to a higher tier valuation, we credit them the cost of the Tier 1 valuation already purchased. This is our way of helping clients achieve the crucial data needed to make smart decisions in a cost-effective manner. Even so, there are several important reasons for a Tier 1 valuation. To begin with, it offers an important strategic planning tool. Every business owner wants to grow their business, but growth is more strategic when you know where you are today, in addition to where you want to be next year or in 5 years. Next, it empowers small businesses to enter into accurate and fair buy-sell agreements. More, a limited scope valuation assists in situations in which a partner is being added to the firm or removed. Last, it is a useful tool for small companies in the earliest stages of an exit planning process. Tier 2, standard scope valuation. This option is appropriate for businesses more than $1 million in size. It is not really possible to compare Tier 2 to Tier 1's limited scope valuation, as the difference is night and day. While Tier 1 valuations rely on software to generate a valuation, Tier 2 involves a thorough process based on a valuation built from scratch, specifically tailored to suit your company. The industry term that you'll hear me use during your consultation is calculation of value report. The cost for a calculation of value report ranges between $4,000 and $7,000. Our team typically spends 30 hours compiling the data and producing the output report. One of the interesting features of a Tier 2 valuation is that the output can result in a written or verbal report, depending on client preference. This aspect is worth exploring so the two options become clearer. Most clients choose to receive a written report. A standard scope valuation with a written report typically runs closer to the higher end of the range, as preparing it this way requires extra time. A Tier 2 valuation with only a verbal report will typically cost 30% less than the written version. However, the real reason some clients choose this option isn't just pricing. Some clients worry our valuation will differ significantly from their own opinion or a report from another valuation firm. In this case, not having a written record of the valuation may be of strategic importance. Why? They won't have records that may need to be shared with other parties in the case of legal conflict or other similar situations. The strengths of a Tier 2 valuation should be clear by now. Tier 2 offers a true valuation based on a model customized to your organization and completed by a team of experts who spent a significant time developing a deep understanding of your operations and current business health. Note, many clients complete a Tier 2 valuation on an annual or biannual basis as an ongoing tracker of company performance to assess if strategic initiatives are impacting the company in a positive or negative way. Another use case for a Tier 2 valuation is an imminent scenario in which the buyer isn't yet known. A standard scope valuation in this capacity can provide a wealth of information assisting you in understanding if offers are, in fact, lowballs or reasonable in nature. Tier 2 valuations are also useful in cases of amicable partner separation or other business leadership changes, with an emphasis on the amicable part. The reason I stress amicable is that a Tier 2 valuation is not designed to stand up in court or to the highest levels of scrutiny. To balance the usefulness and cost of a standard scope valuation, we typically cut hours used to vet assumptions and are selective on how we seek answers on assumptions and other issues. This is perfectly valid for use in business, but not up to the standards of the courtroom. When you know you're headed to court or are tangling with the IRS, it's time for a Tier 3 valuation. Tier 3, full scope valuation. Tier 3 is like the muscle-bound older brother of a Tier 2 standard scope valuation. This is also referred to as an opinion of value report. Certain scenarios make this tier the only choice for certain clients. As mentioned, when you know you're headed to court with a partner over a business divorce, a soon-to-be ex-spouse in a divorce, estate and gift tax planning subject to IRS purview, or any 1,000 different reasons business owners end up in litigation, you require the robustness of a Tier 3 valuation. Similarly, Tier 3 supplies the necessary firepower to counter the IRS. In both lawsuit and IRS scenarios, Sofer Advisors offers expert testimony based on our work for an additional fee. As you might expect, the price point for a Tier 3 valuation is higher. It typically runs from $7,500 to $12,500 for a full written report. This is largely driven by the increased time involved, generally 50 hours. One mistaken assumption made by clients is that a Tier 3 valuation is just a Tier 2 valuation with more time spent vetting assumptions and finding answers to questions to ensure accuracy. The fact that we spend additional time to iron out questions and deeply vet our assumptions is certainly true, but it isn't the only difference between the tiers. The full scope valuation written report includes a full narrative with far more than the math involved in the valuation. It offers the thought process behind our work, as well as a wealth of information useful for strategic planning, especially when creating a roadmap for your company's future. A key use case for a Tier 3 valuation is an M&A situation in which the buyer is known and a deal expected in the short term. I coach my clients that the more we know of the buyer, the more important it is to perform a full scope valuation. A known buyer is likelier to attack the valuation, again, in order to buy low. This plays out daily in our current business climate of M&A mania. A robust valuation is the best defense against a known buyer running roughshod over your company's true value. Along with IRS dealings, lawsuits, and known buyers, Tier 3 valuations are appropriate for any other situations that are not likely to stay amicable, like a shareholder dispute in a family business. Even beyond these rocky situations, Tier 3 valuations are extremely useful due to the vast amount of information they include compared with a Tier 2 valuation. Many clients complete a Tier 2 valuation annually, then add in a Tier 3 valuation on milestone years to gain the most insight into their operations and performance as possible. Carole's valuation choice. After learning the basics of Carole's situation, we presented Tier 2 and Tier 3 as the best options. Although she initially leaned towards the former based on its lower price and time commitment, we urged her instead to commission a Tier 3 full-scope valuation based on one crucial factor in her situation. She knew the most likely potential buyer was her competitor, Bill. Based on this fact, it was vital she received the most robust valuation possible. Why? As stated, the known buyer was likely to come in with a low offer and aggressively target the independent valuation. Thankfully, she followed our advice. We immediately began work on a full-scope valuation to provide her the most insightful valuation possible. Our report empowered Carole to effectively evaluate offers from both Bill and another animal hospital system that entered the mix. Negotiations are still ongoing as of this writing, but Carole feels more secure armed with the knowledge of what her business is truly worth. She also feels better equipped to secure a future for her family by making smart decisions in her business. What a Sofer Advisor's valuation means to you. In the first chapter, we discussed a big problem faced by many business owners: lack of planning for the future. As you'll recall, not planning for the future is a plan in itself, a plan for failure to exit the business. Sofer Advisor's Tier 2 and Tier 3 valuations offer the solution to this problem. Carole came to us because of a specific triggering event. Her husband's cancer led her to exit much earlier than she expected. But that doesn't mean you should wait until your own triggering event to perform a valuation. In fact, many clients consider regular valuations a best practice. The optimal first step for your company and your eventual exit is to start a cycle of assessment and reassessment, measuring both where you are today and where you want to go tomorrow. This analysis is enabled by regular valuations by the Sofer Advisors team, typically in the form of annual standard scope valuations and a Tier 3 full scope valuation at less regular intervals. Planning ahead in this way will enable you to form an exit plan much as you would form a financial plan for your private finances. But like everything worthwhile in life, preparing a robust exit plan requires significant training and teamwork. We'll cover that in the next chapter.